The calluses on my hands had started to soften. 18 months without a hammer, without cold mornings framing walls on a job site in Barrie, without the smell of fresh lumber, and my hands were becoming the hands of a stranger. I would sit by the window in my room at Maplecrest Gardens and press my thumb into my palm just to feel the fading ridges, proof that I had once built something, proof that I had once been someone. I want to know where you are as you listen to this. A kitchen in Winnipeg, a commute into downtown Toronto. Wherever you are, pour yourself something warm, because what I am about to tell you took 67 years of living and 18 months of sitting still before I understood it fully. This is a story about a daughter I raised, about a son-in-law I welcomed into my home with a handshake and a cold Canadian, and about the single most calculated decision I ever made in my life, which was to do absolutely nothing until the exact right moment. My name is Walter, and I built things. Houses, mostly. Started with a small framing crew out of Barrie, Ontario, when I was 23 years old with a second-hand truck and a table saw my father left me. By the time I turned 50, Brant Construction had 14 full-time employees, contracts with 3 municipalities, and a land portfolio worth just over $4 million. None of it came from luck. It came from waking up at 5 in the morning when the temperature dropped to -20, and pouring coffee into a thermos, and doing the thing anyway. My wife, Patricia, stood beside every nail I drove. She managed the books, handled the city permits, remembered every subcontractor's birthday. When she passed 8 years ago, pancreatic cancer, 6 weeks from diagnosis to the end, I thought about selling everything. I sat in the empty house in Innisfil for a full month and thought about walking away. But Patricia had always said that a man without work is a man without purpose. So I kept going. My daughter was the one who helped me keep going, or so I believed. She was 34 when Patricia passed. Married to her husband, a financial advisor out of Vaughan, for 3 years by then. She came up every weekend that first year. She brought groceries. She sat with me on the back deck watching the lake. She handled some of the administrative paperwork for the company when I was too exhausted to focus. I told her she had her mother's kindness. I told her that more than once. Her husband was polished in the way that makes you want to trust someone before you've decided whether you should. He always brought a bottle of wine. He asked good questions about the business. He remembered what I'd told him the visit before. After about a year, she suggested he start coming with her to quarterly reviews. Just to help you organize things, Dad. You're doing too much alone. I thought it was generous. I thought they were looking after me. I was 65 when she sat me down in my own kitchen and told me she was worried. She said I'd been forgetting things. She listed examples I didn't recognize as my own, leaving the stove on, mixing up client names, parking my truck 2 blocks from where I said I'd left it. She spoke quietly and held my hand. She had printed something out and left it on the table. Early onset cognitive decline, the header said. A pamphlet from a memory care clinic in Newmarket. I've already spoken to your doctor, she said. And then, I've already spoken to a lawyer. I should have asked more questions. I should have called someone. But she was my daughter. And I was tired in the way that grief makes you tired. A tiredness that sits in your chest and makes you trust the people in the room because the alternative being alone feels worse. Within 6 weeks, I was a resident of Maplecrest Gardens Long-Term Care in Orillia. I did not go willingly. Let me be clear about that. I sat in the office of the facility administrator and told her I was not cognitively impaired. I told her I had a company to run. She showed me documents, physician assessments signed by a doctor, Harpreet Anand, whose name I had never heard, a substitute decision-making form with my signature on it that I did not remember signing, a power of attorney that named my daughter as my sole legal representative for financial and personal matters. I told her those signatures were not mine. She handed me a box of tissues. My daughter stood in the doorway. Her husband stood behind her with his hands in his pockets. When I looked at her, she looked at the floor. "It's the right thing, Dad," she said. "You're not well." The door to my room had no lock I could use from the inside. The first month I spent most of my time at the nursing station telling anyone who would listen that I was being held against my will. The staff were not unkind. They were trained. They nodded and wrote things down and brought me decaffeinated tea. A social worker named Brigitte came 3 times, and each time I gave her the same information: the name of my company, my accountant's number, my lawyer's name, the fact that I had never in my life been assessed by a doctor. Harpreet Anand, and each time she said she would follow up. She always smelled like vanilla lotion and she never followed up. My daughter came every 2 weeks. She brought fruit baskets and magazines, and she sat with me for 45 minutes at a time and spoke about the weather and about her friends and about a kitchen renovation she and her husband were planning. She did not speak about the company. I stopped asking her to. I had noticed something in her eyes, the third visit in not guilt, exactly, but a kind of practiced calm that told me she had already decided who I was going to be in this story. The confused father, the man who needed care, and anything I said or did that contradicted that story would simply be absorbed into it as more evidence of my condition. So I changed my approach. I stopped arguing at the nursing station. I started attending the scheduled activities, watercolor painting on Tuesday mornings, chair yoga on Thursdays, a current events group on Friday afternoons that was led by a retired high school teacher named Dennis. I was pleasant to the staff. I helped another resident named Harold with his crossword puzzles. I was, by every external measure, settling in. But I was also thinking. There was one person I had not been allowed to contact in any organized way, and that was my accountant, a man named Ray, who had worked with Brandt Construction for 11 years. Ray was precise and loyal, and the kind of man who kept paper files even in a digital age. I had not been permitted a personal phone. The administration, per my daughter's instructions, held my devices for safety, but the common room had a landline that residents could use for outgoing calls between 2 and 4 in the afternoon. It took me 3 weeks to memorize Ray's mobile number from memory. I had always been good with numbers. My daughter had apparently not considered that. The first call was 40 seconds. Ray, it's Walter. Don't react. I'm in Maplecrest in Orillia. I need you to pull the last 8 months of company financials and hold them. Don't tell anyone. Don't say my name out loud. A pause. Then Ray's voice, very even. Understood. I'll call you Thursday at 2:15, he called. Every Thursday, 2:15, for 16 months. What he found took my breath away, not all at once, but in increments, the way you discover the full scope of water damage only after you start pulling up the floors. Her husband had been named interim director of Brandt Construction within 6 weeks of my admission. He had restructured 2 of the company's largest contracts, redirecting work to a numbered company registered in his mother's name in Mississauga. 3 parcels of land I owned in Simcoe County had been appraised by a firm he had hired at 60% of their actual market value, and a sale was being prepared to transfer them to a holding company. My RRSP had been partially liquidated. The proceeds had moved through 3 accounts before disappearing into what Ray described, in careful language, as a personal investment vehicle that is not Brandt Construction. The total, by Ray's estimate, after month 12, was somewhere between $800,000 and $1.2 million. He had also found something else. The physician's assessments used to have me committed the documents signed by Dr. Harpreet Anand listed an address for that physician that corresponded to a strip plaza in Barrie where Anand's clinic had closed 2 years prior. The license number on the documents was real, but the assessments themselves had been backdated. Ray had quietly engaged a retired paralegal he knew from his church. The paralegal had a contact at the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario. I want you to understand something about those 16 months. I was not suffering in any dramatic way. Maplecrest was clean. The food was adequate. Dennis and I developed a genuine friendship over the current events group. I taught Harold's roommate, a 91-year-old man named Clarence, how to play cribbage. I watched the seasons change through my window, the trees along the creek going orange and then bare and then slowly filling back in. I was not happy, but I was not broken. And I had learned something from all those years in construction. The foundation is everything. If you build on solid ground, you can afford to take your time with the rest. My daughter never knew about the Thursday calls. She never thought to check the common room landline log, or if she did, she never noticed the number. She continued to come every 2 weeks. She continued to bring fruit. Her husband stopped coming after the first 3 months, which told me everything I needed to know about his level of guilt relative to hers. In the 14th month, Ray told me that a buyer had been found for the Simcoe County properties. Closing was set for 60 days out. I told him it was time to move. He had already spoken to a lawyer, not my original lawyer, whose number my daughter had intercepted, but a litigator in Toronto named Sandra Chen, who specialized in elder abuse and capacity law. Ray had provided her with 16 months of documented financial transfers. the physician credential irregularities, the power of attorney filing timeline, and the recorded dates of every phone call he and I had exchanged, which he had been logging in a personal notebook kept at his home. Sandra filed a capacity review application with the Consent and Capacity Board of Ontario. She also filed a civil claim for financial elder abuse under the Substitute Decisions Act. And she made a formal complaint to the College of Physicians and Surgeons regarding Dr. Harpreet Anand's assessments. I was not informed of the hearing date until 4 days before. It was conducted at Maplecrest itself, in the sunroom, at a round table with good light. An independent assessor sat across from me for 2 hours. We talked about current events, about the construction industry, about the layout of properties I owned and could describe from memory in precise detail. We talked about my wife. We talked about the cribbage rule I had explained incorrectly to Clarence and then gone back the next day and corrected. At the end, the assessor stood and shook my hand and said she would submit her findings within 5 business days. Her findings were that I had never, at any point, demonstrated the cognitive impairment documented in the initial assessments. The initial assessments were referred to the College of Physicians and Surgeons as potentially fraudulent. I was discharged from Maplecrest Gardens on a Wednesday morning in early April. The ice on the creek behind the facility had broken up 2 weeks before, and the water was running fast and cold and very clear. I stood outside with my bag, the same bag I had carried in, and breathed in air that smelled like thawing ground and dead leaves, and somewhere, just barely, wood smoke from someone's fireplace. I had not smelled anything like it in 18 months. I stood there for probably 2 full minutes before Ray pulled up in his Subaru. He did not say anything when I got in. He just handed me a double-double from Tim Hortons and pulled onto the county road. Some things in this country are so reliable, they're almost holy. Sandra had prepared for everything except the one thing my daughter had not prepared for, which was me. My daughter and her husband did not know I had been discharged. The facility had notified her as required, but Sandra had timed the filing of the emergency injunction, freezing all transactions related to Brandt Construction and the land holdings for the morning of my discharge, precisely 2 hours before the notification went out. The Simcoe County property sale was halted with 11 days to closing. I did not go to my daughter's house. I did not call her. I checked into a hotel in Barrie, nothing extravagant, a clean room with a decent bed and a view of the parking lot, and I slept for 11 hours. It was the best sleep I had since Patricia died. The morning after, I met with Sandra and Ray in a boardroom. Ray had brought the files. Sandra had brought a colleague from the criminal division who specialized in fraud. We spent 4 hours going through everything methodically, the way you go through a blueprint before you pour concrete. You do not rush this part. You do not get emotional during this part. By early afternoon, my daughter had been served. I was told she called the facility 3 times in the hour after. I was told she called my original lawyer, who told her he was no longer in a position to assist her or her husband. I was told her husband left their house in his car at 4:17 in the afternoon and did not return until after midnight. These things were told to me later. At the time, I was eating a steak dinner at a restaurant in downtown Barrie that I had been going to for 20 years, and I was having a glass of Merlot, and I was looking out the window at the street where I had driven 1,000 times, and I was thinking about Patricia. She would have told me to eat something green. I ordered a side salad. For her, my daughter called me for the first time 2 days after she was served. I let it go to voicemail. She called again that evening, and again the next morning. On the 4th call, I picked up. She cried. She said she was sorry. She said her husband had convinced her, had explained it as protecting the business, protecting me, that I wasn't managing properly. She said she hadn't known about the money, about the land transfers, about the fraudulent assessments. She said she had believed him. She said, "Please, Dad, please." I listened to everything she said. I did not interrupt her. When she finished, I said, "I believe that he manipulated you. I believe that you let yourself be manipulated because it was convenient. There is a difference between those two things, and you are going to have to live with that difference for a long time." Then I said, "I love you. That has not changed, but I will not be speaking with you again until the legal process is complete." I hung up. Her husband was charged under the criminal code with fraud over $5,000 and criminal breach of trust. The civil claim against both of them proceeded in parallel. The physician, Dr. Anand, was found to have signed backdated assessments in exchange for a payment routed through the same numbered company in Mississauga. His license was suspended pending a full investigation. The college does not move quickly, but it does move. The land sales were reversed. The RRSP funds partially recovered. The company contracts renegotiated back to their original terms. 3 of my 14 employees had been quietly let go during the 18 months. I rehired 2 of them and promoted the third to site supervisor for a project in Collingwood that had been stalled. The first morning I pulled up to a job site again. A woman named Carla, who had been with me for 7 years, looked up from a set of drawings and said, "About time," Walter, and handed me a hard hat. That was better than any apology I could have received. Her husband accepted a plea deal. He avoided the longest possible sentence by agreeing to full restitution, which his own assets could not cover, and which will follow him for years. The civil judgment against my daughter was structured so that her liability was separated from his in recognition of the evidence. That distinction was her lawyer's best argument. It was not a complete defense. She was found liable for her role in the unlawful detention under the Substitute Decisions Act. She did not go to prison. I had not asked Sandra to pursue that outcome. I had asked Sandra to pursue the outcome that told the truth in full, publicly, and let the law decide the weight of it. That is what happened. I did not feel triumphant the day the final judgments came through. I want to be honest about that. I felt tired in a different way than the Maplecrest. A tired that comes after something is finished, not a tired that comes from being held still. I drove out to Innisfil after the call with Sandra, and I sat on the back deck for a long time looking at the lake. The ice had been off it for weeks. There were 2 sailboats far out near the far shore, and the light was doing the thing it does on Georgian Bay, adjacent water, in late spring, where everything turns copper around 4 in the afternoon. I thought about the Callises coming back. They were already starting to. 2 months back on job sites, and I could feel the ridges returning. Patricia would have said something about that. She would have said something about hands that remember what they're for. My daughter and I have spoken twice since the proceedings concluded. Both times were brief. She has moved out of the house in Vaughan. Her husband is gone. She is living with a friend in Kitchener, working at an insurance firm, beginning something that will take a long time to become her actual life again. I do not know whether we will find our way back to anything. I know that I do not hate her. I know that hate would require me to spend energy on her, that I would rather spend on a site plan in Collingwood or a Thursday cribbage game with Clarence, who is still at Maplecrest, who I visit every few weeks, who has gotten genuinely good at the game and beats me now about 1/3 of the time. What I know about the 18 months I spent in that room is this. The people who put you in a corner and wait for you to crumble do not understand the first thing about what makes a person. They see stillness and they confuse it for surrender. They see patience and they read it as defeat. They are wrong. The stillness is the foundation. The patience is the plan. I built my first house when I was 24 years old with a framing crew of 3 and a borrowed transit level. The foundation took us 4 days. The framing took 11. The client came to me on day 7 of framing and asked why we were going so slowly, and I told him we were not going slowly. We were going correctly, and that there was no day in the life of a house that matters more than the days you cannot see, the days the building is just learning to stand. He was in that house for 30 years. He sent me a card when he sold it. Still standing, it said. Thank you. That is the only kind of work worth doing. And I am 67 years old, and I have my hard hat back on, and I am not finished. Where are you listening from? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story found you at the right moment, you know what to do. We're building something here. Come be part of it.